welcome to November. We're getting to the end of the year, as we were talked about last time. I know you've been very busy with your activities, podcasting away and posting on LinkedIn. It's going well,
It's
right?
been mad. It's been completely mad.
Yeah.
October was my busiest month ever. And I can't believe just how much content got out the door. Some of which is already published, some of which is going to be published very soon and in November. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and thankfully I'm working with a great team that allows me to publish a lot. And I think that's important because I mean, similar to you, right? We're both in the business of creating content to educate the market, society at large about carbon removal. And so, yeah, I think we need to ramp up our activities. But it's been a good month.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So, but number one in your November
Let's
Giga
start with
10
a
is
downer.
actually a downer. Number one is a sinking ship. What's the sinking ship?
Yeah, I
Talk to me.
also in my business I always use the approach of bad news first and then continue with the good news. So bad news first. Um, we spoke in April about how at the International Maritime Organization there'd been a multilateral breakthrough, and despite pressure from the US and the US walking out of the room quite literally, there had been an agreement on a new essential net zero framework that was going to tax emissions from shipping to get money into a fund that was going to be used to green the industry, primarily through sustainable fuels, but also potentially through carbon removal. That was kind of a done deal. That was what I understood and most people understood. Apparently, there was kind of a review meeting 6 months later. And for that review meeting, the US pulled out all the stops in a way that I think nobody's ever seen in multilateralism. They essentially went to vulnerable and poorer countries and told them, we're going to put sanctions on you. We're going to put tariffs on you. We're going to revoke visas of your UN staff in New York if you don't vote against this. And surprise, surprise, suddenly what was a comfortable majority became a comfortable majority against it. And this has been officially paused for a year. Some say it could be revived. I have my significant doubts. But it kind of shows how the US is going to start to screw up not just domestic policy, but multilateral climate policy at large. And I think it was very disappointing and worrying for many.
Yeah, that is, it's hard to, or, I'm not sure why they're so aggressively going to shut down things that were long negotiated. So that just doesn't make sense. And it's a lot easier to destroy things than create them. So
I
I
think
know
because
it's
they
so
can,
hard to come
right?
together. Yeah.
It's symbolic. The White House released kind of a press release just before, which was, when you read that, it's basically they want to go after anything that says climate right now, and they
Yeah.
saw an opportunity with some very vulnerable countries there, and so they went for it. The question is, where will they stop? Like, what will they target next? And yeah, I'm sure we're going to cover that, but worrying
Well, I
times.
don't know. No inside scoop on that. Okay, let's move quickly on to better news. Number two, the UK is crushing it. It looks like they've set some targets, would like to, and are setting sustainable aviation fuel mandates. What else are they doing?
So we spoke about them because the UK has done a lot of things this year. They've put in place these carbon contracts for difference, kind of 15-year set price guarantees for developers of DACCS and BECCS. They are doing CapEx support. They want to integrate CDI into DTS, and now they had this kind of independent review, which essentially was mandated, was officiated by government, and it's incredible. It's a 200-page report that gives a beautiful view of all the policy options that the UK has. And some of the things, just one example that I highlighted because it's really interesting, we're increasingly looking at SAF, sustainable aviation fuel mandates for aviation, right? And what they're recommending is instead of having a SAF mandate, we should have a net zero fuels mandate where essentially aviation companies can choose how to get there. Do they get there by producing eSAF or do they get there by doing CDR? It's just one example. Dedicated targets, a department for carbon removal across ministries. These are just policy recommendations. But I met the team. I was in the UK last month. I met a lot of the teams working on CDR in the UK. It's an incredible team. It's one of the most numerous teams I've ever met in government, and they've been working on carbon removals for years. They know what they're doing. They've got political backing. So the UK is really one of the countries that I've got high hopes for. Again, until hopefully it will never happen. Reform UK, the craziest party I have witnessed in a long time in the UK, could take over government in the next election. And if that happens, everything will go down the drain, guaranteed. But if that doesn't happen, I think we have high hopes for the UK.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be the same, the same activities as the U.S. administration right now, I would imagine, if that happens.
Yeah.
Number 3, CDR goes on tour. What was that like being in a bus with 60 government officials? And where did you go?
They weren't all government officials, I have to say. We also let some corporates in and some journalists, but it was the coolest CDI event I've ever been part of. And the DVNE, the German CDI Association that I founded and I chair, we did a CDI experience tour. Other people had much better names after. They said we should have called it CDR Safari or CDR Party, Bus Party or something. Anyway, we had everyone in a bus. And for 2 days, we toured parts of Western Germany, going from one CDR project to the next. And showing, the main message was see it to believe it, right? Showing this is not future talk, it's happening today. But also showing the spectrum. So we went from, having breakfast on an organic farm with kind of agroforestry between the fields to getting out of the bus and standing in front of a 100-meter concrete tower by RWE, like a huge energy company that wants to do BECCS. And I think it was really powerful. And so, yeah, it was amazing. We're going to do another one in April in southern Germany. And hopefully it's going to be kind of a recurring format, because we have to show people CDR and we can't fly people to Iceland every time we want to show CDR, right? So let's use local projects, get people in a bus and tour them around.
That's very smart. Seeing is believing. So, yeah. And all right, on the back of that, more policy stuff. Number 4, can we design demand? And that has to do, again, we've been talking about this many times before, is the EU ETS. And so how are we integrating CDR into the ETS?
So we've talked a lot about that integration, and I'm sure this will come up a lot as the Commission is working on a proposal for next July. But Carbon Gap, the leading CDI NGO in Europe, they're actually suggesting something different. They're saying instead of integrating CDI into the ETS, we should have a dedicated removal trading compliance system, essentially, which operates independently of the ETS. And it has a lot of benefits because you can essentially create a mechanism that is solely focused on achieving carbon removal targets. You avoid mitigation deterrents. You can design policy instruments that are specifically for removals. And they released a paper and did a workshop on what this could look like. I think it's a tough sell. It's always hard to create new policy infrastructure. It's always easier to modify or integrate into existing infrastructure. So it's going to be a tough sell. But it's an interesting read, and they're doing a lot of advocacy work to see if this has legs. But yeah, check it out if you want to see kind of an alternative way of doing compliance outside of an ETS.
That's interesting. That comes into number 5. It's a takedown. Voluntary versus compliance markets and what will scale CDR faster. I'd love to hear who won the debate. And, again, it's a very different approach, obviously, between America and the European Union when it comes to compliance issues. So I can imagine where they both were falling, Tito and Eva.
So we had Tito representing kind of as I guess the American perspective, or at least the voluntary carbon markets perspective, and Eva the compliance markets. It was our first ever live debate. So we did it actually on stage at Carbon Unbound, which was really fun. And we live streamed it. We put it on our podcast and YouTube. I was actually more convinced by Tito. I moderated the debate and I sided with Tito at the end, but Eva quite comfortably won the debate. So the room was more on the compliance side than the voluntary side. And again, the question was, what will scale carbon removals faster, compliance markets or voluntary markets? And it's an open debate. I think you can reasonably argue both sides.
Yeah, you can argue, obviously, rules will make things required. Therefore, that would be faster. But then you've got the rebellion. So you would have to deal with the rebellion, ensuing rebellion against those rules. So,
and obviously you need both, right? And as with all these debates, DACCS versus biochar, whatever, it's obvious you need both. So I think these debates are more there to tease out the strengths and weaknesses of focusing on one versus the other, but both will play a role. We know that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And speaking of rebellion, we've got Bill Gates, number 6. Bill, WTF. Yeah, I think it's funny because I mentioned to you that I was following this sort of what would we say, new flow of concepts around climate, and I've been doing some of my own interviews around, the strong ties that the climate movement has made to things like hurricane strength and some of these claims that are coming under attack. And especially what Bill was saying around, it's not as big of an emergency as we thought. Um, Go ahead and jump in. But it's interesting. We're definitely in uncharted territory and new territory for sure.
Yeah, that Bill Gates letter. When I read it, I mean, I enjoyed reading it because I learned something from it. And I thought that it was very well written. It gave a lot of really interesting examples of where that can give you hope, right? He's a techno optimist to a certain extent. I'm as well, and I guess it was kind of my kind of proposal that he was writing. Where it got very dangerous was how he pitted mitigation against adaptation, and also the complete disregard for tipping points, because after a certain point we cannot adapt. And the worst thing is when you see the reactions. I mean, this was completely predictable, but from Trump to Farage, they are saying, look, your guy, he's saying climate change is a hoax. That's obviously not what Bill Gates is saying, but he gave them such easy ammunition, right? And that was 100% predictable. And so I really think that whatever he had in mind when he wrote that, I think he did climate and the whole climate industry a disservice, because it's going to make our lives harder. It's going to make the work of policy advocates like myself harder. And so, despite the intellectual value of what he wrote, I don't think it was a smart move. But yeah,
Well,
from your
what's so
vantage point, I'm curious to hear
no,
what you saw and heard.
well, I think, yeah, it's definitely harder. But what's so interesting, it's like one has to deal with some of the inconsistencies head on, right? So what Bill did was exactly what Michael Mann and Stephen Schneider, who I knew well at Stanford, who's now passed, wanted to avoid at the very outset of climate discussion. And that was to make it very clear and simple. And by doing so, they had to narrow down conclusions off of very complex systems, which is where this debate lies. And by suppressing that all this for what, 20 years, I guess they suppressed it for about 20 years. That is now changed, right? And so it does make policy harder. That's what they've been trying to avoid this whole time. But what I think is positive is where you end up. And it was interesting because I did interview one of the people from long ago that disagreed with some of that simplification. She was called the climate denier. Was that at the end of the day, you come away from, yeah, okay, so maybe some of these linkages aren't that strong yet. Why would you gamble with the life support system of planet Earth if it's a 10% chance of it happening? That's quite a large percentage. So I think it's a risk analysis question, and how risk averse are you to catastrophic outcomes, right? So some people are like, let's just drive it right up to the edge. And other people are like, let's take precaution and fix it early, right? So I think that's where this really sits more than people that want to continue with business as usual, making their money, meeting their quarterly earnings targets and all of that, rather than, fixing the world for the next seventh unborn generation, right? It's long-term versus short-termism, which is what we're grappling with. That's how I see it happening. And that makes policy very difficult because it's a short-term activity, right? So you're pinning a short-term activity to a long-term view. And that's become very clear to me, which I think is interesting, right? Uh, so, yeah.
Oh, I'm just
What do
wondering
you think?
because he has access. He is very knowledgeable. He has access to all the
Mhm.
resources in the world, and there were like take the tipping points thing. Like there were some deliberate omissions in his piece. And you're right. I didn't know how many words. It was at least 5,000 words. It was a long piece, and you don't talk about tipping points once, right? Like why? Like I don't understand why he would not be able to acknowledge some of these risks that, as you said, have become very significant.
Right. And what's
Um,
so interesting is that some of the earth sciences people would say that some of these tipping points are oversimplified, right? And that's probably why he didn't include it. Not saying they don't exist, not saying that they aren't there, but that there's more complexity than we would like, right? For policy, right?
yeah,
So I'm not a scientist. So I have to, and I told this person, and I'm going to drop probably like 6 interviews around this topic. You and me both are people who, if I may say, we've been observing closely, you more specifically than me, this world, right? And we can only rely on the scientists telling us what they think and say. And if you have two scientists that have storied, degrees and papers published and all of that, and they're disagreeing, how are we to decide like who's right or wrong? It's very difficult. We can't, right? We have to trust who we're listening to. And then that's why there was so much pressure to deplatform. I mean, they weren't deplatforming back then, but basically kick out people that made it more complex. And now those people are coming back to haunt the climate movement, is what
yeah.
I'm looking at, right? And so, yeah,
Well, looking
I
forward to
can just
those interviews.
right. And I can just report as a documentarian saying, look, this is where we are. It's
Yeah,
not
of
like,
course.
I mean, what I can't, I, like I said, I can't judge based on the science, right? So I would argue, if you want to know where I sit, I would argue let's do everything we can to innovate and support nature so that we don't confront environmental collapse, obviously, right? So
Agreed.
that makes perfect sense to me. Uh, not funny, but anyway. All right, number 7. Every company in CDR in one database. Who put that together?
Yeah, this is a fantastic database that actually has every single company, and it's way more companies than I thought. I thought I had all the companies, but I don't. And Grant Faber, who has done quite a few of these kind of different community efforts. Like, for example, he did a DAC database back in the days, and now he went all out and collected everything. And he did it primarily to help people who are looking for jobs, from what he described. And obviously, that links closely to another initiative of mine, which is CDI Jobs, where we track all these jobs and make them available and searchable. But yeah, it's primarily for me, it's anyone who's kind of curious to kind of browse through where the world stands in CDR. This is a great database. There were a lot of companies that are very obscure as well, that are very small, that you've probably never heard of, that might already have gone into bankruptcy by the time you see this sheet. But he committed to maintaining it, and I think it's a great resource moving forward for many people in the space.
We need as many guideposts as possible. And another bad news. Yeah, I noticed this too. Number 8, DACCS in distress. Yeah, it does look like director capture is running into some headwinds. What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting piece. CDI4I wrote a kind of 6 month review of biochar that we discussed last time. They did a 6 month review now of DACCS, and CDI4I is moving from just providing data to also providing some opinions and analysis, which I think is great. And their point is that, yeah, I mean, there's going to be big consolidation in DACCS. There's way too many DACCS companies. DACCS has delivered only 0.5%, or is it 0.05%? Let me check before I get
It's
0.05%.
0.05. It's not a lot
It
compared to
has
biochar
delivered
anyway. Yeah.
very small percentage of what
Yeah.
has been sold. And so, yeah, despite all the innovation that's happening in the space right now, is a tough time. And so this is essentially, this piece provides an analysis of why that might be and what type of companies might survive, and what they really need to focus on.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, tough times for DACCS. I think if you talk to DACCS, it really depends. I feel when you talk to really early stage DACCS companies, they're like, we're fine. We're just in a lab. We're going to hang out here for a few years. When you talk to the really big boys, they're like, you know, hopefully, like, we got this. We have boots on the ground. We've got investors who are backing us. But the kind of companies that are maybe trying to raise a Series A, maybe even a Series B, those seem to be in a really tough spot right now, because it's hard for them
Mm-hmm.
to raise that kind of capital.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, and I think that also losing some of that American funding too is, we talked about that last time.
Yeah.
That did not help at all.
No.
Yes, number 9, the future is female. And thanks for including me in that list. back
Of
then.
course.
But yeah, it looks like there's, of course, a lot more.
Yeah,
Uh,
this month I didn't feature one woman. I featured 20, and obviously that's not enough. But the post did exactly what I was hoping it would do. And now I've got a list, or anyone who wants clicking on that post has a list of probably 200 incredible women working in CDR, right? And so it just goes to show that there is so much amazing talent, and it happens all on a weekly basis that I'm invited to something, and again, it's kind of four guys on a panel or four guys on a webinar, right? And uh, with these posts, I'm just trying to kind of make it clear we don't really have excuses to not highlight women and have women participate in all fora, because they're founders, they are leaders, they are policymakers, right? Yeah, you got great women all across the sector.
Number 10, CDR takes the pavilion, not the stage, at COP30, and Chris Neidl, the UN CDR high level climate champion, uh, is over there and telling us all about it. So, what did he say?
I mean, as we record this, COP is entering its second week. Again, it's the first time ever that we have a dedicated pavilion. Um, I'm going to be releasing quite a lot of content in November about COP, but we already did an interview with Chris Neidl, and again, it's the first time we have a high-level climate champion specifically for carbon removals. And it's really interesting how he describes essentially how he's trying to not make CDR its own thing, but really try to embed CDR systemically across everything, right? Across all different sectoral initiatives. And I think with great success. So we're going to have him back on at the end of COP to also do kind of a review. But it's great to have somebody of the caliber and passion of Chris, who's really a CDR veteran. He's also the founder of Open Air. Yeah. He's also the founder of
Yeah.
Open Air Collective, and so he's really giving it all. And yeah, very happy to have him there. And let's see what comes out of COP for CDR this time.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, or you, one, CDR does need that kind of advocacy. It's interesting, even after, we are in the space for a bit now. I was being asked to do a project on renewable energy, and the person who wants to do the project, has very not antiquated is the wrong word, but just not informed, because we still don't have all of the talking points generally out there, in the way that we need, again, like, oh, it's either or emissions reduction or CD, you know what I mean? It's all that layering that still needs to go out there to help people understand that this is part of an essential tool in our toolbox.
Yeah.
So good on Chris to be down there. I'm glad that he has that new. It's a relatively new job, so that's great.
And hopefully you will stay on for second and third year, because I think these things take time to really embed in a process like COP, and we will need
Mm-hmm.
people like him to. This is just the first year to keep going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, that was a good November.
Definitely. And yeah, I'll see you
Okay.
again in a month's time, and we'll
All
have plenty
right.
to talk about with COP and everything.
That'll be great. All right. Take care, Sebastian.